Welcome to the Sherpa Search on Tech podcast. This is your host, Maciej Szczerba. I help technology companies to recruit experts and managers. In the podcast, I talk with my guests, industry experts and thought leaders, about topics at the intersection of business, technology, and the development of civilization. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sherpa Search on Tech podcast. My name is Maciej Szczerba, and we discuss tech megatrends and its influence on business and our daily lives. Today, my guest is Bart Sobczyk, a data science consultant with a vast experience in various consulting companies, advising large multinationals, large enterprises in the implementation of data solutions and exploiting the data in large enterprises. Thank you very much, Bart, for joining me tonight. Because
My pleasure.
We have
Hello.
It's already dark where we are.
Yeah.
But it's late afternoon actually. But there is buzzwords like digital transformation, which is all the rage nowadays. It's been all the rage for the last couple of years. And in my opinion, the main issue related to digital transformation should be data governance. As in most corporates, data is dispersed, and companies do not use the resources they already have. What is your experience with transforming enterprises in regard of data?
So this is actually tackling
an open question.
Yeah, it's tackling a very broad question. However, it really depends on the industry. So essentially, when you think of an industry and how they govern the data, we think of how mature they are. And I'll give you an example. Let's say we talk about our government. They collect a lot of data, but they're not really doing much with this data. They do some statistics every now and then and so on. But there is always a chance of exploratory analysis. And it's similar, for example, to open source data that you have on the websites, about WHO and so on. So you have companies, bunch of data, but not really utilizing it to its full potential. Now, when I usually approach companies, I try to understand how mature they are in their analytical process. And if I could think of, let's say, the simplest way to explain it, I would say it's 4 steps. So the first one, the most immature step where the company is where they use a descriptive analysis of what is currently happening. And let's say they have the sales analytics, they have logistics data, and so on. Then the next step is data on data. So diagnosing why this data shows these insights. And this is already a much more mature organization when we're talking about it. And these are companies that not only want to utilize the information that they already have, but they also want to improve their company with the data collection process. And this is probably where I would say most of the companies are. They look for insights, but also they need some help in finding the right data collection processes. So we're not even touching data governance here.
Right.
It's still before that. Yeah. When we think of the next level, it's predictive analysis. Now, I mean, a lot of people can criticize predictive analysis, that you should not predict analysis based on historical data. I mean, we all know this discussion.
Yeah, it's a philosophical discussion in a way.
Yeah. So it's possible to predict something. Like, you can get some insights. Like, there are great companies that bring insights from the, let's say, market seasonality. So I don't know. Let's say you sell Christmas trees, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna sell them
3 weeks.
in what? Yeah, exactly. In one season, not anywhere else.
A company selling Christmas trees. That's
yeah.
the most competitive business on earth.
Or another example. Not too many people are familiar with that. You know, Kinder Surprise chocolates with like toys inside.
I have a 6 years old.
Perfect. So do you realize that there is a different product for summer and winter?
Yes, I have realized, because my little one always wants the summer ones.
Yeah. So as you can see,
really?
you need to predict what will be sold, and when you need to switch different, let's say, supply chains of different products, and how to govern it. So this is already next level. Like, Ferry Road is doing an excellent job in such governance. And then the highest level of what pretty much every single company aspires or would love to aspire is prescriptive analysis. Do you know what that is?
Not really. Could you explain the term?
Sure. So if you
it's
try
future oriented, isn't it?
Well, not really. I mean, it's something that I don't think of many companies to even tackle this topic, because it's very high level of maturity. But essentially, it's asking the question: if I want to achieve my goal based on the data of what is likely to happen, what happened, and what most likely will not happen as well, what will be the prescription, like a doctor's prescription,
right,
of what I need to do? What is the insight of based on this data? And these 4 layers of insights, they differ significantly, and they're often sold on the same package, whereas it's unrealistic. I would say various professionals.
To the business.
But you cannot provide such detailed guidance to the business without taking care of the bottom line, which is, for example, the data gathering, data quality assurance, data pipeline synchronization, so that you get all the data synchronized in the same timelines and so on. So these are the 4, let's say, areas that I would say where I would place my clients in terms of the maturity, where they are. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it's quite fascinating for me, as I wasn't aware of it. How mature generally companies are in Europe in regard of these 4 layers of data analysis? Maybe let's say, how about mid-sized companies, or your experience is largely with large enterprises? But let's say
My experience is mostly with large enterprises and primarily within Western European or American market. However, my industry expertise is quite broad. So I worked with oil and gas, automotive, FMCG, hospitality, financial sector, venture capitalists, you name it. I work with different types of clients, which is not a problem because typically in a team where you work with a client, you usually have a subject matter expert who guides you through the business rationale of different data. However, if I were to say where the biggest field of improvement I would see in terms of the quickest ROI, basically, I would say that would be FMCG. Because FMCG companies sit on a lot of very good data. But in order to make sense of it, it requires a lot of investment, which not necessarily those, whether it's manufacturers or retailers, it doesn't matter. They're not necessarily so invested to commit to, except as last time I talked to you about Żabka, the Polish, #1 cafe chain.
Or small retailer.
And the largest smallest retailer in the country, which is,
it's like 7
in my opinion,
in Western Europe, just for our viewers who are not from Poland.
Yeah, they are on top of the let's say the data maturity
they are digitally very
pyramid
advanced in general, as they have autonomous shops.
Not only that, but also they really do have great predictive analytics of the product placements, where you need to put what's going to sell, what kind of shopping, what kind of a shelf place you need to sell to the manufacturers to get the best results and so on, as well as how to combine different promotions. They're absolutely excellent at it.
Right. How does the work with subject matter expert look like? Because this must be a big issue in the work of consultant in the consultant's job.
So let's say take a step back and explain essentially what a data science consultant
is
do and what's the role. So probably the best way to explain it is to tell you the story of how a product or project is sold. And I'm saying product projects kind of similarly, because usually we think of a data product. So if you want, let's say, a product that will advise you to make certain business decisions, you need a project that will develop it, right? So essentially at the beginning, you need someone who understands the business. So let's say I was doing a project in the field of crop science. I have no idea about crop science. So I needed to be educated about what is important in particular markets. So I was working, let's say, in 4 markets, and I needed to understand the differences. I needed to get high-level insights of, for example, in Africa, different crop is being planted than in, let's say, Asia, Europe, and so on. So I need to get high-level understanding of what these markets are doing. And it's not even touching data at this point. I just need to understand the business. The next step is I need to understand what kind of data they collect from different parts of the region, meaning if it's even viable to talk about one region, or there's no point of investigating that any further. Because if, for example, the key market is France, and one of my markets that the client designated is, let's say, Uganda, then it might not be in the best interest of my client to invest in research of this particular region at that particular point in time. So this is sort of a discussion that allows us to understand, between me and the person who actually understands the industry, to understand where we can bring the biggest value before we even talk to the client. Because it's not the client's role to tell us, let's say, what they want, because they're not proficient enough in data to explain it. We need to propose something on the first meeting. So it's an investigative process from the very, very beginning to comprehend what is the market, how do they differ, what is the competition, what kind of data collection process is possible in one market or the other, and what could be the potential in a haze picture ROI for an investment in a particular product. And this is some kind of a work that we do before we even talk to the client, in terms of business clients.
Yes, I had an interesting discussion the other day with also on this podcast with a person implementing automation solutions, machine learning solutions, and this is basically the very same most important question: how much do I save? How much do I sell more?
Yes, and
at the very end of the day.
I mean, this is why the client buys the project, right? So we need to prove the value for their money. This is the most important part. And this is not the end. It's only the beginning of the entire journey. I don't want to go into too many details, but when you think of it, let's say you want to sell, I'm going to make it very abstract. You want to sell potatoes. Now, there are two kinds of potatoes, edible by humans and by animals.
Didn't know that.
Now, I actually learned it recently, so that's also fresh news for me. I hope I'm not wrong. But anyways, let's say you have a company that have a mix of both of them and want to transform from one field to the other. Now, you have a lot of different independent variables, so the variables that you don't have the effect on. So soil, the contracts that you have with the fertilizing companies and machines and so on. So for us, if we would work with such a company, we would need to understand, okay, their goal is to move in this direction. So I don't know, human potatoes, edible by humans. So what needs to be done? And what kind of data do we need to collect? So we need to collect the data of what is the share of the plantation, what is the possible cost of replacement. So you need to remove the current crops. You need to you need to plant the new ones afterwards, and so on. So this is all this industry knowledge that comes from the consultant that actually knows the business. He's the business consultant. He understands the industry. On my side, I create a diagram of what kind of data I need in order to solve this problem, and what kind of data I need to predict if it's actually a worthwhile investment. So I'm this kind of a translator between data and the business need.
Right. This is a very, very great, great talk. As I didn't have this picture in my mind.
I mean, I brought the potatoes
because from this perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I brought the potatoes simply because I read an article today about crops, potato crops. But I mean, it's essentially if you work in big pharma, it's the same. If you work in automotive, it's the same. I will not know your business as well as the business consultant who actually has a thorough understanding of the market.
Right. Did you have occasion, let's say, to work along with business consultants, or
All the time.
all the time?
Yes. It's very difficult to work without them.
So it's like McKinsey, BCG, these kind of guys.
So I'm going to be very conservative in this topic, because there is a bit of a, let's say, difficult history in the data industry with regards to traditional consulting companies that did not have this background, this technological data background. And they tried to provide some solutions that were not necessarily feasible. And it wasn't their fault. It was the fault that they simply did not have the experience in the implementation of these solutions. Where ideas were great, however, the implementation was a little bit more, or usually far more complicated than what was proposed. So typically, my favorite type of consultant is actually from the client side.
Okay.
So I find the subject matter expert, can be category manager, can be whatever you call it, the guy who actually knows the industry. And one thing that I require from him or her is a lot of time commitment, because I will be coming back with questions after questions after questions. I will be checking data, coming up with more questions, trying to understand where I map the business goals, where I have the data, and what is missing.
On a very practical level, this might be kind of difficult because these people are busy, and it's
right. So I'll give you an example, because I promised you that I will think of some real life examples to bring to this conversation. I had this one client from an industry heavily impacted by COVID, to the point that they were about to face closure. And our primary sponsor was the CIO, who asked us for help and the support in solving the issue that was the result of the COVID pandemic restrictions. And thanks to him, we also got the patronage of the CEO to actually impose a rule across the company that if I am to have a meeting, everything else is supposed to be canceled by the employees of this company, and that will be the highest priority. So this is one example where it was critical because it was business critical, right? Another example is actually something that happens on regular basis, is when I talk to C-level management or VPs. We usually meet, and I mean, as I said, I often worked with the US. We usually meet in early morning times, so like 4 a.m. their time, 5 a.m. their time, so that they can accommodate these very important conversations ahead of their schedule, which is usually packed. And it's extremely helpful to have this kind of a patronage from the upper management. If we don't have that, then it usually means that this entire endeavor will be far more costly and lengthy. Because I need half an hour of someone's time. I don't need any more. I have a list of questions, and I simply need a quick brainstorm. But if I don't get that, I'm not going to get the right results in the email.
I imagine that C-level people tend to, this is my experience with, let's say, CEOs and C-level in large organizations, that they derive, of course, like everyone else, from specialist positions, this or the other expertise, an area in the company. The higher up they come up in the corporate hierarchy, the more helicopter view they are, the more abstract their thinking becomes. So it's a joke, but it's also what I had with another guest on this podcast, that sometimes people come up and say, you just make me this kind of chat GPT just for our company. So let's say, how do you deal with this kind of let's say ivory tower mindset, I joke, of C-level people?
So it's a very valid question, and I will answer it in a very project manager style answer, to be honest. So you have two approaches: bottom up and top down. And I'll give you an example of bottom up. I worked for a huge oil company that composed of different, let's say, entities that were part of it, that already had different data products, data science programs, and so on. However, the mother company did not have this unified data or even reporting experience as they would wish to have. Now, in that case, you need to unify a lot of different bodies, and you need this sort of, let's say, blessing from the higher ups. So if your project sponsor is anywhere less than VP, it's going to be a very difficult challenge. VP is probably the bottom of who you're going to be talking to, because the VP can actually talk to the C-level management and request support for this engagement, where just keep in mind that the data projects are usually expensive, right? And they usually don't have immediate return of investment. So this is one model. Now we have a second model, which I mentioned to you, that there was a big business problem of the entire enterprise. And there, it has to come from C-level management. And then the rest needs to understand what needs to be changed within different departments, because there are some changes to be done. In case of one of the clients, for example, one of the solutions was that I needed to create an entire data department from scratch to not only reduce the costs, and thankfully we didn't have to actually decrease any workforce, but we actually decreased the cost thanks to the fact that the message from the top was, there is a problem, these guys are here, they're looking for solutions, you guys help them. Does it make sense?
It does. It's very, very educational, very informative.
Glad to hear that.
This is a real world, not kind of, politically correct.
I mean, don't get me on politics, because politics is a different story within a client.
Yeah. So regarding politics, do you have to break silos?
Obviously, continuously. And I mean, you have experience as a recruiter within the industry, and you hear a lot of buzzwords. I deal with
many interest stakeholders all the time, and conflicting interests.
Yeah, so let's just say You probably remember beginning of previous decade, everyone was talking big data, right? Big data is everything. Right now, nobody even mentions this because it's kind of
yeah, there were jokes. How big is big data?
Exactly. So there's a lot of buzzwords that are usually flying around, or actionable insights or whatever. You even have those buzzword generators that you can pick up. Now, the point is that at the end of the day, you have business questions that certain people have. And you need to identify who benefits from these answers most. So if you look at, for example, the upper management, C-level, VP, directors, and so on, they usually have a, as you mentioned, helicopter view. They don't really dive into the details of why something is happening. Because if they want to know why, they usually ask a department head of something. And they say, you know, please explain it to me. But they need to have a quick overview of, are we doing good or bad? This is as simple as it gets. And this itself poses a very huge challenge because you don't have one answer to this question. And to illustrate this, let's say you have marketing department who tries to show how well a product is performing on a market. Then you have the accounting that actually counts like all of the expenses, including marketing. Then you have the
doesn't treat business as business.
Exactly, but essentially you have a lot of entities, and a simple definition of ROI for them is different. A simple definition of, let's say, demand is different, because you can have a demand from the retailers, the end users, or you can have a demand from, let's say, the wholesalers, right?
Right.
And none of them are equal. They will always differ. So in order to break these silos, you need to define these KPIs in a particular way. And in my experience, it's difficult, but typically the best solution was to create a KPI dictionary or data dictionary, if somebody will, different names for it. So for example, imagine that you're working in, let's say, sales, and you're working for a company that sells beverages, and you're trying to understand how well you perform. You go to this dictionary and you see, okay, I have sales figures that have descriptive definition of what it actually means, and I pick the one that is relevant to my department. Because probably somebody from another department, let's say I work in Coca-Cola, I'm selling Coca-Cola, and there is, I don't know what other product of Coca-Cola, let's say Sprite or whatever. Let's say guys in Sprite already have it calculated. So I'm going to use their KPI and make it in line within the company's standards, right? So breaking silos in this way is probably the easiest way, even though it sounds very complicated. It's probably the easiest way, creating the data dictionary. The more difficult one is usually the bread and butter of what we do, which is backend. Which
what do you mean by backend?
By backend, I mean data collection design or strategy, data collection itself, data ingestion, data migration, data, entire data process of the data pipeline that you get from, let's say, if you go on Amazon and you view a product, the entire data that gets you to the point that the product was delivered to you. So this entire data pipeline needs to be consistent and able to address business questions across various range of stakeholders that have different agendas. They look at the data differently, but the data needs to be gathered properly, but also maintained in proper quality. And I'm not boring you here.
No, not at all.
Because
why would you?
One critical part which I wish companies would invest in more would be data stewardship. So essentially, responsibility for this entire, let's say, field of data from the business perspective, an understanding of end-to-end what happens to this data with one person, and be responsible for key decision-making that will not impact other departments or other silos.
I have seen such structure in practice. There is, let's say, a data department taken out from the IT department as such, and there is a chief data governance person.
So
I saw it in a media
separate. I would separate it a little bit, because typically IT department is responsible for hardware data collection and the software processes. The data department is responsible for data quality, what variables they look for, what they gather, and so on. But the data steward is a person who connects both of these fields, but also understands the business value of this data. So he talks to the business what information they want to have from this data. And this single point of contact is kind of a magician who has all the answers. He knows the data, he knows how it's gathered, processed, and so on, but also he knows what the data is supposed to serve. And this is very unique. And this is something
is it often?
I would say very rare. More and more common, because when you think of data, as I mentioned, usually data projects, they do not bring revenue. They usually decrease losses. But at the same time, data products, when they're well maintained, they decrease the risk, or for example, cybersecurity risk, right? So it's one of the big challenges that we are facing today in this industry. So having one person actually devoted to one field might be a cost to a company, but in the long run, it's a well worth investment, because people in the company can change, but this guy will actually always know what's happening and will document it. First of all, that's the most important part. He will document it.
I haven't seen this kind of role formulation so far in corporate structures.
Yeah, it's if I were to, let's say, explain how I usually approach the client. So let's say you are head of
sales, whatever.
Sorry?
I said sales.
Sales, right. So you're head of sales, you want something. You want to understand, let's say, what is the impact of your competitors within particular season over something. And this is one of your 100 KPIs that you're interested in. So if you go to IT, they will have no idea what you're talking about. They will tell you, here are the variables, make a sense of it. If you go to the data department, they will say, yeah, we have the data. Here is the long formula that it's calculated. So enjoy. And the guy from the sales will just look at it and like, I don't even know how to, like, I don't know if it's correct or not, because I'm from sales, right? I'm not a scientist. So that's why this kind of a data steward is a future position. And I think it will be more and more popular in upcoming years, especially with the current AI technologies that you mentioned, ChatGPT and so on.
ChatGPT
Because
is everywhere.
yeah, it's all over the place these days. But essentially, these people will be essential because without them, finding the answers will require a team. And these guys are a team in one person. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes very much sense. You mentioned building a team for a client. How to build a good data team, data consultants team.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about data consulting because data consulting
All right.
is really
data team
separate
right.
entity.
Yeah, I messed it up.
But typically, you would start with a conversation on what is the mission of the company, what they need to achieve. And this, I mean, a lot of people come, let's say, they listen to the business vision, they listen to their CEO and they say, oh yeah, we have the town hall every year. The guy comes over, says something, and it doesn't matter, right? And then the shareholders are listening to it, and they don't really care about what's going to happen in 5 years. They care about the dividend at the end of the year. That's the biggest picture, right? But at the end of the day, the person with the vision, so the CEO, has to have a robust message that will need to be explained through his C-level partners, as well as the people below him. And this is where you start in terms of creating a data department. How, in the most efficient way, you will help your CEO materialize the vision that was communicated. And this is the absolute key question. And if you don't ask that, your data department will be shut down very quickly because all the higher ups will report to higher ups and they will say, well, yeah, but the CEO won't like the answer, right? So it needs to be coherent with the mission of the company. And at this point, you start to look at the organization itself, how it currently governs the data. Do you have one IT department? Do you have separate IT departments? Do you have different, let's say, sub-entities within a company that might be merged, possibly, some of them, or not? Will it reduce the cost? Will it increase the efficiency? So most of that is looking for efficiencies on 2 different fields. And business is none of them, actually. Because business, we already know. We defined what we want. So one key point is data. So who uses what data? If people are using, different entities are using the same data, then they have the analysts doing the same analysis of the data, then it's a waste of time and effort, and it costs money. So it's better to combine them in one team and create an efficient group of people who actually understand what they're working on, and they can serve several internal customers within the enterprise. And they sort of, well, I mean, it's a bad name for it, center of excellence, right? It has a very bad rep, but it's essentially what it is. You need experts in this one particular field. And this is one example of a model that you can implement. A different model is something that I introduced to one of the clients where I actually gathered every single data specialist, including analysts, data visualization specialists, and so on. And I created one department with a workflow governed by the CIO branch of the tree, where the businesses within the enterprise have to document business justification and expected ROI before they request a data product from this department. So it looked like this. I'm a director of marketing. I want to have, let's say, a report showing me XYZ. I go to the CIO tree. I say, hey, I want this. This will allow me to reduce costs or whatever, improve something. This is the expected outcome. And the CIO branch decides what is the priority within the enterprise according to the C-level mission. So if it's a quick win, let's accommodate it. If it's actually something core business, that's the priority, and so on. And then you have this entire department cooperating with other departments like IT department, gathering data, transforming data. You have the guys responsible for servers and so on. So they cooperate internally already and output to the business the desired result after business validation. So it's absolutely different model. It's what I like to call it is a data product factory. It's basically, you want to build a car, you come and say, I want a car because this. Here, what I want from the car. They come back to you and they say, this is the design of the car. Do you like it? You say, yeah, I want this, I want that. And at the end of the day, the business gets the car, right? Oh, I mean, symbolically, the car, obviously. So it's an absolutely different model of how a data team can work. And again, it's not one glove fits all. It really needs to be embedded in the maturity and the culture of the organization to find the right compromise between different such models.
Makes sense. Bart, this was a very educational and very informative talk. I'm very happy to have had you here today with me. Thank you very much, and I hope this is not our last conversation on this podcast.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, and well, the time went by very quickly. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Sherpa Search on Tech. If you have enjoyed the show, please subscribe to our show wherever you listen. Thanks again. The Sherpa Search on Tech podcast is a production of Sherpa Search, an executive search firm specializing in the tech industry, helping hire the right people for expert and managerial positions, and advising how to build and develop long-lasting, high-performing IT teams. If you would like to learn more, reach out to us at maciej.szczerba@sherpasearch.tech or visit our website sherpasearch.tech. See you next time.